the founder and CEO of F-Flat Books. We are calling this first episode Episode 0 because it doesn't really fit into our new format that we're putting out on F-Flat. But before we get started, Kevin's just going to say a few things about the podcast moving forward.
So, as Marissa mentioned, we're very excited to partner with F-Flat Books, and we're going to talk a lot about them as a company and what they offer everyone tonight during the podcast, or today, depending on when you listen to it. But one of the things we really want to do is we want to take opportunities to tailor make it to the people that are listening, both teachers, students, and anyone that would just be interested in what's going on in the music world, especially digitally through the podcast. And the best way to get the people that we want to speak to and people that have great ideas to give is if you know of anyone and you hear this podcast and you think this would fit, one idea that they have might fit great with what we're doing, we want to try and get their name to us. So if you can fill out a nomination form that we can link in our text box underneath the podcast link, there's a nomination form. If you can just drop their name, anything that they're working on, and why it would be great for us to chat with them. We love to get anyone we can and everyone we can doing some great things musically.
Yeah, and it's also, if you follow our Instagram, the link is also there. And it should be blasted out if you're on the F-Flat mailing list. So you can find the form a lot of places, and we would really appreciate that. So Sarah, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
So you talk about yourself a lot on your Instagram. No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. On your Instagram, and you write blog posts, and it's really nice that you share all of those experiences with the F-Flat clientele. But just if you could for us, could you kind of tell us a little bit about your background as a musician, a teacher, and now what your life is like as a professional teacher and now CEO of this company?
Sure. Yeah, it is strange because prior to launching F-Flat Books, I didn't really share anything publicly about my work as a music educator. And now I'm always on social media sharing things I'm doing. So it's been a big change for me. I've been teaching in a public school for the past 14 years. And so in terms of my history as a musician, I grew up playing the piano. That was kind of my primary instrument. So I grew up classically trained. And I sort of see my music education as being two different worlds. Like I almost had two different music educations. So I had my school-based music education where I learned to play in band and orchestra, and I played the flute, and I played the tuba, and I played the piano, and I did concerto competitions and all of that. And then at the same time, when I was in middle school, I got my first keyboard. I started writing my own music. I started playing in bands in high school. And so I kept doing that all throughout high school and college. I still do that today. And so I always felt like these two sort of personalities were very much split. And then when I went into my PhD at Temple University, I found a way to bring them together and realized that my work as a rock musician could influence how I taught my traditional classes and vice versa. And so it led me back to the classroom, and I started publishing a bit and took a sabbatical a couple years ago, went to publish a book, was very unhappy with the current publishing system and academia, and we might get into that more later. But long story short, I just decided to build my own platform and see what happened, and F-Flat Books was found. So I still teach full-time. I teach outside of Philadelphia. I'm also a mom. I have 3 kids, 6 and under, and so I am very busy.
I know so for those of you who don't know, I've worked with Sarah now for a few years, and I'm constantly amazed, but also inspired as a female watching you do all of these things. Like, wow, someone's actually making this happen and making it happen well. So you're a wonderful example.
Well, it depends on the day, but I appreciate it.
In terms of like when you dive into when you weren't happy with the publishing and things like that, did you see? And I think for me, I'm right in that middle of, I love the excitement of doing things on a technology standpoint, but I think also some people maybe older than me get a little nervous about it, and then younger, they're all about it and they're good. When you weren't happy with how things were published and you kind of looked at this potential idea of making your own platform, was it like scarier to think this is a whole new frontier in terms of the technology stuff, or were you, this is perfect, this is exactly what I needed to do it?
I think it was very confusing because I saw it happening in other industries in terms of ebooks becoming a bigger thing. The day I decided I wanted to start an ebook company specifically was after listening to a podcast from this home crock pot cook. This sounds ridiculous, but I heard this home crock pot freezer meal lady who I love her freezer meals. She talked about selling ebooks, and it just made me realize that, like, yeah, I've bought food ebooks before. I've bought ebooks from other places. I love them because you can link in them, like they're interactive. They're so easy to update. It's much more inexpensive. You get them immediately, all that stuff. And I was thinking, why is this not happening in music education or in academia? And prior to this, I published my first book by myself in 2016 or 2017. I'd have to look it up. And I asked specifically the publisher if I could have an electronic version available, so that way I could be linking content inside of that. And they just said, no, we don't have the technology to do that. Which, I mean, the technology is just hosting a file. So it became very clear to me that the music ed world was not ebook friendly. And so I think it was exciting to think about breaking into it. When I brought the idea up to my brother, he just kept saying, there's no way this doesn't exist already. I'm sure it exists already. This is too basic of an idea, He wasn't like, this is the coolest idea ever. He's like, this is very basic. If it doesn't exist, that's crazy. And so, yeah, I wasn't sure if people would latch onto it or not.
And that sorry, I went off script a little bit just because I felt the moment there. I have to apologize to Marissa because she's typing the questions, and I don't like when I just don't follow her.
No, it's good. Come on.
So with that in mind, you were filling that void that you saw and things like that. But what has the mission of F-Flat as a company evolved into now that you filled that space that you found?
That's a really good question. So our core mission has never really changed, and I'm really happy about that. Our core mission was our publishing spaces in music education are not inclusive enough. We don't have a diverse representation of authors. It's mostly academics, it's mostly male, it's mostly white, and authors themselves are not honored. So you don't retain the rights to your work, you don't get paid fairly. And so I think in my mind, I wouldn't be running a company. I just wanted this platform to exist for my own work. And so I found a couple other people who wanted that space as well to jump on board and launch it with me. And this is so naive of me, but I just thought this thing will just run itself and I'll get to put my books on there. I didn't realize that running a company takes so much time. It's ridiculous to say, but I think what's been exciting is seeing, now I can see where the needs are, right? I can see where people are excited about content that we're sharing. And I think where it's evolving is I want our space, our community to be sort of a one-stop shop for professional development, whether it's through an ebook, whether it's through a podcast, whether it's through our blog, or in the future, we're actually going to be offering courses on our site that we're going to try to launch in 2021. So it's growing into be that whatever a music educator needs, they're going to find on our site, and they're going to find it in an affordable way. And whoever created that content is going to be the one who gets paid for it, not just our company.
So you just talked about so much. I'm trying to decide where the next good place to go. So you just finished running, I'm wording this poorly, but the company's been up and running for about a year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So have you been able to see the effects on like either the music education world or just those people accessing the site even? And if so, what has the feedback been? What has the effect been on those who are using your site?
Yeah. So I am a teacher. I like mentoring people. I like teaching people. And almost to a fault. So if someone emails me that follows us on Instagram and says like, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do with my guitar class, they're sending emails trying to support them. So I feel like with this company, I've almost fallen into a mentorship role to strangers. And that's been really exciting for me. Again, just to see where those needs are. And then also to have this incredible community of authors and contributors like you guys who I can also pull from. So it does really feel like a community. It feels like we're running it together. And I think most of what I've received negative feedback, not much, but I have received some negative feedback. If people didn't like a blog post that I wrote, they didn't like the opinion I expressed, or, one time someone got mad at me because I said Amazon in an Instagram post, just like random things that I had to learn to deal with, and I'm still learning to deal with. But the positives definitely outweigh the negatives. Like we just had a conference in August and we had so much feedback from that, and people just being grateful that they had the opportunity. We had people coming from all around the world. We had someone from Turkey and someone from India and Australia, and they're coming to hear from educators that we brought together. And for me, that is just so energizing. It just makes me want to keep building and building.
Yeah, I feel like that's almost like a parallel to teaching so much, because I remember as a young teacher, like getting that first parent email where they weren't happy with something in your classroom and it destroyed you, but it's just something you had to deal with and fix, and then it makes you want to do better and keep moving forward. So I think that's just so cool to see that it's not just in the teacher classroom where things like that are happening.
Yeah.
And I think that moving into like a wide internet space, when we're used to a smaller set of people, maybe 30, 35 or 60, depending on your ensemble and things like that, to hear criticism and things like that, it's so much easier to take to heart because you're seeing the students you're working with and just shifting how that works. But from like a teacher standpoint, especially in the teaching space we're finding ourselves right now, it's so overwhelming at times to say, and Marissa and I talk about this quite a lot. When you get past that, it doesn't look the way it did before, but then you can go, but this means we can do this, 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 and this. And you go, awesome, that's great. And then you sit down and then you say, oh my gosh, to do those things, I have to do all of these other things. And it's just so overwhelming and daunting. And to actually have a space that you can go and see people that have done it or see people that are willing to help figure out how to do it is just it's the positive of the internet. And we don't always get to use it in the same way, but it's great.
Yeah, and that is something actually that's changed since I launched this company. I think when I first launched it, I imagined that it would be more of a space for academics. I was thinking like professors of music education or professors of music will want this publishing space so they can publish materials for their courses and so they can connect with in-service teachers. And we do have some universities and professors that are using our site and have projects planned for the future. But in general, I found that teachers want to hear from people who are also in the field doing it. And that's been really cool for me to see, but it's also been empowering for our authors who are publishing books for the first time, and they're questioning, do people really care what I have to say? And now I feel like I have data to back up and say, no, actually, people want to hear from you specifically. And the best sellers on our site are not PhDs, and they are not people who are teaching in universities. They are people who are working really hard as educators. They have great social media followings, and they're out there, promoting their work in a way that's extremely generous. And I think that translates, and people feel a connection to the materials because of that.
I think it's teaching is you can do one lesson and 30 minutes later you can say, well, that didn't work at all, but I have another group of kids coming in and you can fix it and change and evolve. I've been kind of getting to this point where like when we did the podcast and we wanted to look into doing a podcast, I didn't know everything involved with doing a podcast initially. And I almost didn't want to know, because I think if I looked far enough, and again, there's absolutely a space for PhD and academia and things like that. but I felt like if I went far enough to see all of the obstacles in my way, I would eventually get to that one where I found it okay inside to say, well, I just won't do it. But then if you're collaborating with people that are trying it, succeeding and failing and struggling and changing it all in that same space, it allows you to want to do it in spite of those issues. The same thing as publishing things online where you weren't happy with what you were seeing. So you said, well, I'm going to try and make it myself. And then it just becomes what it becomes, which is great.
Yeah, and I have to say that the people that I launched with last year, who are all friends of mine, and they had all written before, they had published before, I made it very clear that I had no idea what I was doing. And just said, if you are okay with that, and if you're okay with things changing, because they will change, because we're figuring it out, then thank you. Please come on board. And I did a lot with our first group of authors to try and build community. You know, we sent them t-shirts and swag and like handwritten letters to say like, thank you for building this community. We really focused on making authors feel special and valued. And I think in the end it helped us, because then when we inevitably hit those roadblocks or changed our payout system, which happened, or, you know, changed the way that our site dealt with different things, there was a little bit of grace there, and there wasn't such an expectation that we couldn't deliver. And I didn't want to get in that position. I never wanted to feel pressured by the authors we brought on to be perfect. I wanted them to expect us to kind of be a mess at first.
This is it's kind of using that same idea in terms of that ebb and flow and those feeling of those errors, but I'm sure that some of that kind of comes from also your experience in a rock band or some of the more structured practice and performance that you did. Have you felt that experience has obviously informed F-flat, but has that experience with F-flat informed your teaching in a regular student-based classroom as well?
Yeah, 100%. They are all related. I think if I had to boil it down to one word, it would be entrepreneurship. I was just talking about this with my husband yesterday, because I was talking about marketing strategies that I've seen with our authors. And I was realizing that most of us who follow the traditional music ed path, we never really have to hustle. We do hustle constantly in our classrooms, but in terms of hustling to get paid or to get people to buy into a product we're selling, to get an audience, we don't have to do that normally, right? We do well in school, we practice hard, we get a job, and then we continue to do well and practice hard to serve those students. In a rock band, you know, you're playing. I heard a great interview with Brandy Carlisle the other day, and she was talking about how she loved having to play in bars and have to fight for her audience attention, or to busk on the street and to fight for her audience attention. And it made her realize, okay, this is what works and this is what doesn't work. And I had that so much in the band, right? When I was booking a tour in a new city, figuring out like, how do I get a show in Pittsburgh if we've never been to Pittsburgh before? Or what do I do if there's only 5 people in the audience and I'm trying to get them to listen to our music? And there wasn't an expectation that people would care about us from the start. I knew that we were going to have to earn the approval and we'd have to earn the respect. I think for some authors who publish with us, they don't understand that that's part of it, right? That it's not like you just put your product out there and people come flocking to it. You have to share about it. You have to hustle. You have to remind people. And so I think that helped me in that I wasn't expecting overnight success with F-flat. I really felt like I had to hustle to get people to notice. And then I had to hustle for my authors too. And I think it does translate to the classroom, because I teach every kid in the school. I teach a general music class that everyone takes. And I don't expect kids to walk into my class and say, I love music, I love this class, I want to be here. I have to work to get them on board. I have to work to get their buy-in. And I think it's good to have that expectation. I really do. I think we need more of that.
I love the statement of the instant gratification thing, because I have the band courses. I also have some keyboarding courses and guitar courses. And I'm fully aware of sometimes people come in having no piano experience. And the reason they're there is because they have to get an extracurricular credit. But one of the things that I try to be very upfront about is most likely or there's a good chance the best thing you learn out of this class will have nothing to do with piano. And it's the sheer fact that there's no instant gratification to this, that some days you're going to feel like you're hitting your head against the wall. And it's an underappreciated skill. I think that it's just because of the nature of where we are and what we do in the world. And I think it's a really great skill for them to learn, to be able to push and push and push through something. I like the phrase of hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of take that and ask the next question. What are you hustling for next? What are the hopes and dreams for the next steps of your company?
Well, I personally am trying to hustle a little bit less. I, our first year in operation, we spent more money than we brought in as company. So in terms of overhead costs and all of that, we were really pouring ourselves into it. And this summer, we just started being able to be a little bit profitable to cover our overhead and then to bring some more people on board, which is really exciting. And so I want to continue to build our team out so people can specialize and focus on different parts of the company. I think the hardest part this past year is that my brother and I had been doing everything, and there's so much involved, especially as we grow. So I see my role more as content director, and I really love like meeting with potential authors, coming up with project ideas, that sort of thing. So that's the role that I'm stepping more into. And also so I can do my full-time job and be a mom and not lose my mind. But I personally, for the company, I want to hustle for providing high quality course content. That's something that I want to be able to pilot and offer for other authors on our site, for other music educators. I think that it could be really valuable if we had a space where people can buy an ebook, but they could also do a deep dive and get more of that, one-on-one interaction with a educator or content creator.
This is kind of dovetailing off of that, and it's like a backdoor meeting if you're controlling content and things like that. But we, for Marissa and I, this was kind of a passion project of something to try and something to do. And as excited as we are to partner, what are you hoping that the addition of this podcast to F Flat brings to both the mission of it and what you see the future of the company doing?
I want our space to build bridges in places where I see these chasms. So one of those places is from research to practice. We have all of these research-based texts and journals, and the people who read them are professors and grad students. And then we have music educators who are not getting a lot of incredible research because they're not at a research institution or they're not going to pay for every journal. So I want us to build bridges through our ebooks and our magazine. I also want to build bridges between my two selves, right? My classical self and my rock self. It's all music. But I think a lot of times in music ed, we're so disparate with those ideas that music making is seen in such a narrow lens. And so we started a blog series last year called Music Beyond the Classroom. And we did some awesome interviews with people in the music industry and, who did all sorts of jobs. We talked to Britt Daniel from Spoon. We talked to this incredible woman who's also a stage manager, Sammy Slovey. So we got a chance to start building these interviews, and people had said to me, you should just turn this into a podcast. And I said, no, I don't have time to do one more thing. So when you all were talking more about this podcast, it just seemed like a perfect extension of that mission, because that's basically what you're doing. You're sharing stories throughout music making and life. And I think the connection is that it's music. And I think for us as music educators, we need to hear more stories that aren't just in the sphere of the way we've always made music and heard music.
And so to that point, to Sarah's point about trying to fill those gaps or fill those voids and the difference between practice and research, bringing it back to just what we talked about in terms of the nomination and things like that. Marissa and I are just two people, and we have a limited sphere, and we're loving the idea of opening up and pushing. But I think one of the best ways to expand the sphere is if you have the opportunity to listen to this and you say, I know person A does this thing that is special in a music classroom or does something special with music that does not necessarily fit in a normal bubble, we'd love to talk to them about it. From a format perspective, we're loving doing these interviews. We're going to keep doing these interviews, but we also want to take opportunities to feature kind of little short moments of what teachers are doing in the classroom, and also maybe even taking the opportunity to highlight some students that are going above and beyond and trying things like composition or improvisation and things like that. So anyone that you feel fits that mold in your life that can become a part of the sphere and push a little farther, I encourage you to just take a look at that nomination page and drop a line and send them this way.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, Sarah, do you have anything else you want to add, either upcoming on F-flat or anything else regarding any of the topics that we ran through?
I'm trying to think. I think we're really excited to expand the types of projects that we're taking on in terms of ebooks. I think we're starting to push the envelope in terms of interactivity, and really just try to, you talked about having spheres of people. And I think one of the cool things about this community is it's gone beyond my sphere. It started with just my sphere, right? The people I knew who agreed to do work for me. And then the people they knew started coming in, and the people they knew. And now we're able to connect with more people. And so I'm excited about people who are coming on board, and we're always open to submissions for projects, both for our community blog and for our ebooks, and for you guys for the podcast. So that's really exciting for me, and I hope we can continue to kind of expand what we offer teachers.
I think that's so awesome. And that's encouraging for me to hear, because I was having a moment yesterday. I know I had texted you, I was texting Kevin, and I was saying, we need to find some different people, and my circle's only so big. And so that's watching your company grow is hopefully, giving us encouragement that this will take off. And, obviously starting with the F-flat sphere. So,
yeah.
So thank you so much for being with us. Hopefully everyone takes a listen to this, and we have some great podcasts. We do have some interviews coming up already scheduled. We have a wonderful student from the Boston area in Massachusetts coming up, and then we also have a wonderful teacher who's pushing the limits in her classroom, and hopefully we can get those up very soon for all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks for having me.